Hello, this is a re-recording of the short slideshow presentation that I gave to the FOWT members meeting on Monday, the 2nd of August. The recording went wrong on that particular night, so it was scrapped. Anyway, since the July meeting, I've been scratching my head wondering what I could do as a slideshow for the August meeting, and I was running out of ideas. And then I suddenly thought, well, an awful lot of people probably know very little or nothing at all about Williamson's triple-decker tunnel. So I decided it was worthwhile doing something on that. It's not been accessible except for a very short space of time in 2003. But we do have a few photographs of it from the inside, and I thought it was well worth showing. And the story has progressed since I made the decision to compile a slideshow on this. So we'll start at this point here. This is an 1881 photograph taken by a gentleman called James Mudd, a fairly famous photographer. And it depicts the open end of Williamson's famous Great Tunnel, this one here. It's been very elusive. We haven't managed to find a way into it yet, but we're absolutely certain it still exists. And it's on the lower ground behind the Williamson's house site. This photograph was taken by the photographer on a visit to Liverpool, and it was found where it had somehow got itself into the archives at the York Railway Museum for some reason. I have a feeling that there was a bit of a mix-up, and it was lumped together with a whole series of photographs that were taken during the construction of the Edge Hill to Lime Street railway cutting between 1880 and 1885, because it found its way into that collection of photographs, although it has no connection with the railway at all, although it's very close by. It's even possible that Mr. Mudd was the photographer who took a lot of the photographs during that period, but I honestly don't know whether that might be the case. Anyway, just take a quick look at this, because there on the right of the photo, you can see another tunnel, the top of the arch, and that is Williamson's triple-decker. This is a close-up of that same area of the photograph. You can see now from these two gentlemen just how enormous the Great Tunnel is, and in fact that parapet is hiding a very much lower level inside there. And as usual, the triple-decker tunnel, like all the others, has been pretty much filled up with all sorts of rubble. Perfectly normal in Williamson's time, or during the years after Williamson's time, for them to get backfilled quite badly. This is a recent photograph taken from that same piece of land. This great brick wall has been built over the open end of the Great Tunnel and various other tunnels or arches that stood to the left. So this should be here roughly where the Great Tunnel is, but lower in the ground than that. And the piece of land with the concrete wall there is directly behind the Williamson's house site. There's a steep slope, there's our fence, the back of our land, steep slope down there to this concrete wall, and then flat land below. And this is where the triple-decker lies. Somewhere below that ground is the triple-decker. Now, back in 2003, we got permission, very difficult, but we got permission from various people involved, including the landowner, to have an attempt to get in through that great brick wall to try and find an entrance into the Great Tunnel. This is 2003. I'm afraid this is the best photograph I could find. It's lifted from the pages of one of the earlier moles. I'm sure there's a proper picture of this, but I couldn't find it. But as you can see, they've gone in there about 6 feet through solid brickwork, and it was all in vain. They didn't manage to find a way into the Great Tunnel. They got through all the brickwork, and then they found all sorts of spoil beyond, and there was something solid. And I'm just throwing in a more modern picture. This is the Magnet Joinery Factory's land. We had a dig on this land about 3 years ago, after the factory was knocked down, in a search for the Great Tunnel. We didn't find it, but this concrete foundation is the rear of the foundations for the Magnet Joinery Factory, and we now know, because we have we have access on our side along the adjoining wall to a series of piles which have been driven down as part of the foundations. And I believe that these rectangular blocks here and here are exactly the same as some we have on our side adjoining our fence. And each one of them is capping two piles that have been driven down deep into the ground. Made life very difficult for us in the magnet chamber that we've managed to get into. But I do sort of start to wonder, behind the two Chris's here and the shrubbery is the top of the high wall. And could it be that they got through that wall and all that brickwork, and then they were just unlucky enough to come up behind one of these piles, and that stopped them. They had to give up, they moved away, they had to reinstate the wall, and they got no further. But on that same occasion, they did turn their attention to digging in another direction at 90 degrees from about the same spot to try and get into the triple-decker tunnel. And this is a rather deep trench. I believe it's about 10 feet deep that they dug down, and they managed to get in. Down there somewhere, he squeezed underneath the top of the arch and found himself inside the top layer of the Williamson's triple-decker tunnel. And that's what it looks like inside. Lovely view. I have several of these pictures, and they're the only ones we've ever had. We got in there and maybe had a few days, and then of course the land had to be covered over again, and we had to move off, and we've not been anywhere near it since. But of course we're now hoping to get hold of that piece of land and get back in there and make it accessible. For some reason, I believe the way they managed to get in was just up there. It's just a tiny little bit of sign of light coming in through that trench, and that's all. And so it's quite near to the end they are. I believe there's about a 30-foot length of it which is intact from the portal, and very close to the portal you have these two enormous great brick ring beams, just about 4 feet apart. I've got no idea quite why they're there. They could be for strengthening. They could have been added later. They might have been there right from the beginning. I just don't know. If you look closely on these photographs, you can now see that this arch is not constructed from brick. This is all stone blocks. But the two ring beams are very much brick. But they're the only things that are brick in this top arch. Can't say anything about the two lower arches of the triple decker because we've never been anywhere near them. You can see them rather more clearly in that photograph, and they're only quite close together. They had a little bit of time to poke around in here and do a little bit of digging, but they didn't get very far. And one thing they believe, some of them believe they saw, was the point at which a feature we call the caver's squeeze, a narrow shaft running in a straight line from the sandstone chamber that we access on our way down to the banqueting hall. That one goes for 30 odd meters straight out through the back of our land at about 18 feet below ground level. And some of the people who were in here at this time believe they saw where that joined into the top of the triple decker tunnel. Now, I can't be sure whether that is really as it was, but it's a good theory, and we're going with it at the moment. There are those two brick rings. You can see they're quite close together. There can't be more than 3 or 4 feet between the two of them there, I would imagine. And just off to the left up there is where they crept in under the portal of the top arch. Now, going above ground, to just give you an idea of what's going on here, this is an aerial view of the area with part of the tunnel's plan as drawn up by the Territorial Army in the 1880s, superimposed on top of it. Here, the dark shadow, you've got the railway cutting, which ran right through the middle of Williamson's land. This rectangular plot here is our piece of land, the Williamson house site, 40 to 44 Mason Street. Our fence is across there, and to the left of it is a steep sloping bank which goes down to the lower ground. And this white hatched area here is our section of the triple decker tunnel. And this is the section that our people got into in 2003 that you saw in the last few photographs. The triple-decker tunnel, of course, ran right across here and to the stable yard on the Heritage Centre site as it is now, below the cobbled yard. And the top level of that is pretty much destroyed, but they do have access to the middle layer. Although it isn't very safe, they do not take visitors in there. And of course, this was absolutely cut in half when the railway cutting was channeled right through the land here. It's about 70 or 80 feet deep as it passes through this land. Previously, the railway tunnel at a very deep level went through in the 1830s, but this railway cutting went through in the 1880s. So completely severing our little section of the triple-decker tunnel from the rest on the other side. I believe there's only about 30 feet of it there, which is intact. And then further on towards the cutting wall, the roof has been very badly compromised, maybe completely destroyed, I don't know. And here we've got another plan. Some of the tunnels are superimposed on top of an aerial view. This is a couple of years old because the old flats are still standing. We now have that multi-story car park there. But this shows our banqueting hall, the magnet chamber that we've dug into under the land next door, where the magnet joinery factory stood. Here you can see the gash that leads us down into the banqueting hall from here, the sandstone chamber. And there, the very thin red line running across through the back of our plot and onto the bank is the one we call the Cave of Squeeze. It's always been a mystery to us what it is, what it's about and what it's for, but we're learning a little bit more just lately. Dave Bridson, who runs the Heritage Centre on the other side, has got a bit more idea because of some of the things he's seen in his section of the triple-decker tunnel on the other side of the railway. This, by the way, is the gold here is the triple-decker again. And we now believe that the Cave of Squeeze stretches all the way to the bottom of the bank and to the side of the triple-decker. Whether it joins into it, we cannot be absolutely certain. But here's a sketch that Dave Bridson drew several years ago of how he believed things are. It's not to scale and it may not be totally accurate, but it's a good guide. Here's our sandstone chamber. That way we go down the gash and down to the banqueting hall. This is the Cave of Squeeze shaft, which I believe to be actually quite flat. This is showing it sloping, but it looks as if it ends at the bottom of the bank where there is a vertical shaft going right down and connecting into all three levels of the triple-decker tunnel, a third level down below here. Ground levels on that land have been changed so many times over recent years by the owner of the flats. And we believe now from what Dave Bridson tells us is this wall has been knocked down and many feet of soil were scraped away from this area down to quite close to the roof of the triple-decker top level. And he concreted it and he had a series of shipping containers, storage containers on that land. But it's been up and down so many times, we don't know where the levels are compared to those days. Now, this is where the story takes a funny turn. I was starting to produce a slideshow on this subject in the middle of July or at the beginning of July. And then we had a visit from a group of urban explorers from Burnley who call themselves the Northern Monkeys. These are the lads here, some of them. And they came on a tour after being recommended by Martin Zero, who is an urban explorer who has made a couple of really good videos with us about the Williamson tunnels. And that created an awful lot of interest. And these lads came down and had a tour and they were absolutely blown away. And they love tight, difficult places to crawl around in. And as soon as they saw our Cave of Squeeze, we couldn't keep them out. They wanted to go down there and explore and find out what it is, how far it went and what it's all about. So we let them have a go because over the years, there have been very few people who have ever ventured down there. Not many people are interested in going down there. It's very claustrophobic, tight little space. It's a long way to crawl on your hands and knees. So looking down into the sandstone chamber from where we used to have to enter down a ladder, this is from the time when we were still emptying the sandstone chamber out. And there you can see the entrance to the Cave of Squeeze. We give it that name because the first person that we know of to go down there was a young girl caver, quite small and nimble, and she shot off down there when she was on a visit and frightened us to death because we thought she was going to get stuck and never come out again. So it was named after her. There's another shot of it. That's the entrance portal to the Cave of Squeeze. You can see it's not very high. Gets another foot higher as soon as you get past this lintel, but it only stays like that for about 20 feet, and then it goes down again. The level drops. In more recent years, we've had a couple of cavers being down there, great strapping 6 foot plus lads who had no fear of tight spaces, and one of them took good quality camera along there with him, and he took a couple of really nice photos, and this is one of them. As you can see, it's dead straight. It's pretty much the same width all the way along, about shoulder width, but it does get narrower at the far end. And it's capped off on the top by these slabs of stone all the way along. And when you go in, the first half of its length is all cut straight out of the sandstone bedrock and done at a time when the ground level was sloping in this area. The ground level's been raised up to the flat since then, probably to create Williamson's gardens. But in those days, this the floor of this shaft was, or still is, about 18 feet below our current ground level, which means it comes out at the base of the bank beyond and no higher. And as you proceed along here, the sandstone walls, which you can still see to a certain extent here, start to give way as the sandstone dips down, and they've built up to keep it to the same level with brick. And as far as I'm concerned, it appears to be flat all the way, and I've been in about 3/4 of the way, and I don't feel as if there's any slope. By the time they reach this point, it's brick from floor to roof, still absolutely level. And in the distance now, you can see what looks like a fall of spoil or a blockage. I didn't quite get that far, but I did see it. And then there's a photograph of it close to, where you can see some of the capping stones have cracked and fallen. So we weren't at all sure whether this was a fall of spoil through the cracks or whether something had been piled in from the other end just to keep people out. And it's remained a mystery for many years. But of course, these lads from the Northern Monkeys went in there and they started clearing some of this spoil away. How they did it, I really don't know. They took a few tools in plastic buckets and they managed to bring a few buckets full of soil and bricks out of there to clear a hole through the blockage. That was on their second visit. And this is looking at the land below there. This is not an up-to-date photograph. This was taken several years ago while the railway cutting was being repaired after the collapse. A lot of work had been going on in this area. The wall that was destroyed, knocked down, was here. It's now been built up again a little bit. But this flat ground, or reasonably flat ground, is where the containers were sitting until the railway collapsed. And not far below the surface, we expect to find the roof of the triple-decker, but I couldn't say just how many feet down it is. Here's looking in the other direction. This is an area that we want to try and get Liverpool City Council to give us access to so that we can dig down again in here. The tunnel mouth would be in this area, level with the end of the wall. And if we dig down in this area with a sloping trench, we should get in. So we were working with the Northern Monkeys. They managed to get through the blockage and poke the camera through, and beyond the blockage, they could see this. There's a pile of loosely piled bricks to the left and to the right, and there's a modern paving slab over the top. On their third visit, we spent a lot of time with one lad down there tapping and banging and poking and drilling, trying to get the attention of a group of people on the surface to try and pinpoint exactly where he was below them. It was quite difficult and difficult to tell where the voices and the noises were coming from, but we eventually pinned it down. This, of course, is the same spot, 2 piles of bricks loosely piled beyond the end of the Cave of Squeeze and that one big slab over the top. And another good shot. These are just stills from one of their videos. The videos were quite good, but of course the camera was jumping all over the place. And we did eventually manage to make contact, and we broke some concrete. We broke the concrete away from this area, quite a large area actually, because it wasn't easy to pinpoint where the man underneath was banging. And the first spot we tried wasn't right, but we got there. This is the base of the concrete wall. And just below it here, we have the end of the cave of squeeze. Absolutely fantastic way to end the day. That pile of loose bricks on that side and that pile of loose bricks on that side is where the slab was sitting. And at that point, we believe there will be a vertical shaft going down and connecting into the side walls of the triple decker. So this is the first time this has been opened up in I don't know how many years, but it's quite an achievement. We now have access to it from both ends. Nobody's actually been in this end yet. It's quite a tight little spot. But here's the last one I've got. This is holding the camera in the open mouth out on the bank, or below the bank rather, and taking a photograph looking straight down towards the sandstone chamber at the other end. So quite an eventful couple of weeks, three sessions on Sundays during July, and these lads have helped us to open this up. And we've got now to decide what's going to happen next, because this land below is not really ours. We're occupying it, and we want to dig down and see if we can find out whether the ideas about this vertical shaft going into the triple decker are correct. But at the moment, we're having to just hold on and see how the land lies. And we will be wanting to proceed there and follow it further. Who knows what will happen? But I don't think it'll be too long before we manage to get into the triple decker tunnel again. And that's what we're working towards, and making it accessible for everybody. So that's the story of what's been happening during the month of July. And it made my little story about the triple decker tunnel a lot more interesting than it was going to be when it first started. So that's all I've got to show you. Thank you.